We do have another big piece of news from today. State Street and Citibank are launching crypto custody services. Jerome Powell has been talking about this the past couple of weeks that banks will start to custody crypto and we shouldn't get in the way of allowing them to serve clients who are legally engaging in the industry, etc. And we saw this with the repeal of SAB 121 that this was going to start happening. This is, in my opinion, just another step up for Bitcoin in the traditional financial industry and integrating into it. I think it's going to be a Trojan horse type situation. So I think it's a good thing that Bitcoin's integrating into the traditional finance system. And the separation of brokerage and custody is a crucial sort of investor protection. It builds trust, institutional trust, provides security to investors, the idea of regulatory compliance, etc. While many Bitcoiners are typically anti-state, more free markets. I think in this case, it's a good thing for Bitcoin to be treated like securities and commodities and other assets, tradable assets in this country. And I think banks being able to custody Bitcoin this is part of the rails that we need to develop for institutional adoption. And so I think it's just the rules of the road. It's been that way for a long time in the traditional financial markets. You've got to separate brokerage and custody. And who wants to answer why? Anyway, I can say it in 3 letters. If you guys can guess which 3 letters those are.
That's what I was just going to bring up, right?
Yeah.
I think the risk here for the Bitcoin industry is that the old school banks mentioned above, they have a lot of power and influence. They're going to take custody. They're going to issue credit against Bitcoin backed loans. There's a lot of money to be made there. And then they're going to very quickly whisper into Trump's ear and say, hey, don't you think it's safer if we custody the Bitcoin instead of the FTXs of the world? All the Bitcoin / crypto natives are FTX and we're too big to fail. Why don't you add a little stability to the market and hand it over to us? Ideologically, I'm extremely against this. That's the type of monopoly we don't want. And hopefully that doesn't occur, but it is a real risk for the industry.
I've been writing something on this. I've got some more work to do on the piece. We're living through the institutionalization of Bitcoin. And I think rightly so, it rubs a lot of people the wrong way because they're thinking like, this isn't what I got into Bitcoin for. This isn't like what Bitcoin was supposed to be about. It wasn't about the banks and custodians and regulation. And one of the themes that I talk about in this is just that A, you shouldn't fight it, and B, just because Bitcoin goes through this institutionalizing phase doesn't mean that later on you can't have a re-decentralizing or a reimagining of use cases and ideas with Bitcoin. And I think that's my base case. And I think there's a lot of benefits to going through this. I think Bitcoin grows a lot faster, a lot more. It reaches more people. It de-risks the social and reputational costs that you incur by publicly supporting Bitcoin. It gets more people into it. And so it's like largely a good thing there. And on the other side of a long and wide wave of institutional adoption, people can push for a new movement. They can push for new ideas and they can say, hey, this asset that you've just been buying in your portfolio, there's other stuff that you can do with it. Come follow me. We've got some new ideas. That's possible. And not only is that possible, that's my base case. And so I think you need to really embrace this period of time where Bitcoin is being institutionalized. It's just a stop along the way. It is not the final destination.
One point I'd like to add here is that Bitcoin does not need the banks. It does not need the state, but the banks and the state absolutely do need Bitcoin. And so let's just make sure we have our directions correct here. I think that's point number one. Point number two is, okay, if Bitcoin gets absorbed by TradFi, does that lead to TradFi being able to change the rules of Bitcoin? Question mark. Or does another risk would be, does it get people too comfortable in a custodial model and they never end up learning private key management? I think both risks are real. I think oh my gosh, the TradFi is going to change the rules. I think that risk is actually much lower. I don't think that you want to kill the golden goose. As soon as you own the thing, your incentive is to just buy it and hold it. You make more money that way than trying to attack it. And I think we've seen endless examples of people falling in line once their incentives stare them in the face. On the other angle, What happens if we just put people to sleep and they go straight to ETF? They never join Swan Vault and do even collaborative custody. I think that's a real risk. But in the back of my mind, who do we think is out there? What are people going to do? 1% of people probably use a Tor browser or less. I don't think more than 1% of holders at maturity will self-custody their Bitcoin. I don't think more than 1% of people will take extreme measures to safeguard their internet privacy. I think that's true about psychology. And so I think the question would be, is Bitcoin robust enough to sustain getting absorbed by TradFi? And can Bitcoin survive with only 1% of users in self-custody? I think the answer to both those questions is yes. And on the 1% of users in self-custody, I also would like to say that's probably at least 30 to 50% of the outstanding supply. So
Interesting.
and the reason is Satoshi issued half the coins in the first 4 years, 25% of the coins in the next 4 years. So you're 8 years in, Bitcoin is still an internet curiosity held by ideologues, right? And those folks are overwhelmingly in self-custody. And so I don't know if
I
Satoshi intended
mean,
that, but
our clients are overwhelmingly in self-custody. 80% of SatSpot in
that's
an
right.
average month are withdrawn. That's an 80-20 rule at Swan in to the good side. That's something I think that might be the case. I don't know what the percentage might be, but I think it's a high percentage of current hodlers have self-custody, and that's just going to keep going down as the whole numbers get bigger and bigger.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to make one comment here. I like Quidam's framing of, are you worried about some influence over forks, like changes to the network, that kind of thing? Legit concern that we should talk about, but separating it from, are people just going to stay in a custodian? And I think that other concern of, will people just stay in a custodian? Obviously, I want as many people to do self custody of Bitcoin as possible. To Quidam's points, we have to be realistic about what that is at any given point in time. But in that category of concern, I think you need to remember that's not an existential threat to Bitcoin as a network, as a protocol. And I'm not trying to diminish somebody who's at a custodian that gets rugged, like a Celsius or something like that. But we need to remember that Celsius going under does not affect Bitcoin. Again, it's bad for the people who get burned, but that's not a risk of, oh, if a Celsius happens, then Bitcoin is dead. That's a totally
It'll
different
crush
type of
price for a
risk.
while, but
Yeah, like it's not
yeah,
a
it
good
doesn't.
thing, bad for
Yeah,
sentiment. Users might get spooked, all that kind of stuff. But Bitcoin is fine after that. So the much bigger concern is what Quidam mentioned first, that, hey, influence over the network in some sort of bad way. And that's a long conversation. But I just wanted to flag, like, if someone uses a custodian and the custodian happens to rug them, it's bad for those people, but that doesn't take Bitcoin down as a network.
correct.
And real quick, just Brandon, I really liked what you said. And honestly, I think the right question for Bitcoiners to be asking is along the lines of what you said. If only 1%, how can we design and manage and run Bitcoin where if only 1% of people do self custody, we're still in a good spot?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is 100% the right question to ask rather than how do we get everybody to do self custody?
100%.
It definitely increases the chances of some kind of derivative inflation paper Bitcoin situation. That's the biggest risk to me. If there's 95, 99% of Bitcoin holders are holding it through some kind of proxy, that FTX was doing it. There's, I don't know. It'll probably be done, right? Somebody's going to be unethical about it and try to get away with it. And so that's the biggest risk to me. The only way to really audit the ledger is to have complete self custody. We're not going to ever have that, but that's important. And proof of reserves as well.
Yeah, I think where we want to stress here, there's another dimension. There's custodied or self-custody, and then you look at the concentration risk amongst the coins that are held in custody. Right now, Coinbase is scary. They have a huge institutional business, a large retail business. You add it up, they have a scary percentage about the Bitcoin. We don't want that. So what we want is, it's okay if 50% of coins are held in custody, but we want those spread out across many jurisdictions, many banks, right? More of a spread out the risk, like a free banking model where shenanigans happens, but the pain is isolated, right?
Mhm.
So we don't want Coinbase to get too big to fail and get bailed out. That's when things get scary.
I'm going to do a shameless plug here. I wrote an article called "Will Bitcoin Follow the rise and fall of gold, and it's like this exact topic. Basically, will there be fractional reserve on Bitcoin? Will it follow some of these same paths? It's a topic I'm fascinated in because it gets into monetary history as well as how Bitcoin is different and how I think things change. So if anyone out there is listening and you want to find that, and if you have any comments on it and you want to DM me or send it out there on Twitter, please do.
And what was it called again?
Will Bitcoin follow gold's monetary rise and fall? And then the subtitle is a look at Bitcoin's scaling strategy. And then I guess this is the subtitle. Bitcoin can achieve its ultimate goal to be a neutral base layer of a new monetary system for billions of users worldwide.